Good evening and welcome. If we could call this meeting to order, and if we could please start with a moment of silence for prayer or reflection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First up, we have adoption of the agenda.
We have a one deletion.
Yes, we do. We are going to withdraw item 7.2, which is the bylaw 4669, which is the CCDA tax bylaw.
Any other additions or deletions? Seeing none, we'll accept it.
Next, we have adoption of the minutes. Item 3.1, minutes from our last meeting of May 3rd.
Any errors, omissions? Seeing none.
Moving on now to our presentation tonight. We have our regular COVID-19 update. Merrick Brown, our Manager of Support Services and Director of Emergency Management.
Welcome, Merrick. You have the floor.
Your Worship, members of council, once again, thank you for allowing me to come present to you and give you a brief update on the current state, both locally and provincially as it relates to the pandemic. So just over 1 week ago, we saw additional public health restrictions come into place. And typically when I stand here in front of you, I'm giving some negative news and some positive news. And today I'd like to give you ample positive news because things are happening and things are really good. Today is definitely a good day. 2 weeks ago, the province was sitting at 23,608 cases. This is when I was standing before you 2 weeks ago. Today, the province is sitting at 21,288 cases. And even last week, the province was sitting close to 25,000 cases. So it's a drop in close to 4,000 cases. New cases, the province was sitting roughly at around 2,000 per day. Today, the province reported 721 cases, as would have been yesterday. So things are occurring, positive things are occurring. Locally, things are improving as well. Once again, 2 weeks ago, we were sitting at 231 cases. As reported on Saturday, we were sitting at 185 cases. Now, unfortunately, the data hasn't been released as of today, but my assumption is that we've decreased, recognizing what has been occurring across the province. What I think is even more interesting and even more positive and even more optimistic is something that was released today by the province, and it's something we've all been looking for, including myself, is how are we doing as it relates to immunizations from a local standpoint. The province today reported 42.2% of all Albertans that have received their first dose of a vaccine. As I said, the province reports local data now. Within Medicine Hat, we're 47.3%. Now that's a considerable number and a considerable increase. But I want to provide you even more data today. So just over the past hour, I did a little bit of data mining, and I'd like to give you the age group comparison between what Alberta is doing and what locally we're doing. This will be by age group, and I'm going to start with the oldest down to the youngest. So 75 and above. Within Alberta, 85% have been vaccinated. Within the city of Medicine Hat, 86%. Ages 60 to 74, 77% within the province have been vaccinated. The city were similar at 77%. 40 to 59 years old, Within Alberta, 56%. Locally, 57%. Still not seeing too much of a difference, but now we're going to start seeing a difference. 20 to 39 years old. Provincially, 33%. Within the city, 36%. And this is the biggest difference. 12 to 19 years old within the province, 16%. Locally, 39%. That's a considerable difference. I commend our teenagers. Once again, 20 to 39 locally was at 36%, age 12 to 19, 39%. So that's 3% of an increase from the next age group. So that's considerable when you look at the province and local data. So there is some hope to this. So what have we been doing as a city? Well, obviously, as I said, our cases have been dropping. So 2 weeks ago, 231. A couple of days ago, we were sitting at 185. We responded to the public health restrictions just like any other municipality, just like any other business. But again, I want to put a glimmer of hope and optimism on this as well. So with these new public health restrictions, we were forced to close recreational facilities. We were forced to stop sporting activities within our facilities. But we started thinking outside the box. We thought, what could we do? So our local staff and our city staff took that opportunity to open spray parks. What does that do? That encourages outdoor activity. That encourages, just general activity and encourages people to get outside. So I commend our city staff for being able to do things like that. We saw that last year, and we're seeing it this year as well. And finally, throughout the pandemic, and especially 2 weeks ago and even 4 weeks ago, we were seeing a higher staff disruption rate. We are seeing higher absenteeisms given the fact that we had increased cases. And once again, another bit of optimism here that disruption is definitely decreasing as we saw with the rest of the province. So a lot of positive messages, and we should take this, but at the same time, I also want to say this with a bit of caution as well. As much as we can think that we're doing a really great job, which we are, things can turn very quickly. We can let our guard down, and we have seen how quickly those cases can increase, both locally and provincially. So with the optimism also comes with a touch of caution. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your report. Any comments? Councillor Dumanowski?
Just very, excuse me, very briefly. Merrick, thank you for your report, and there is measured optimism certainly in your report, and that is tied to what we're seeing across province. Largely the same kinds of links we're seeing on a provincial level happening here in our local jurisdiction here. The stat on vaccinations is very interesting. I wish there were some correlates that we could derive, but we would all be speculating. But certainly that is an incredible stat to have and own for our local area. I guess a couple of things. One, first of all, the spray parks thing, you brought it up, and I know for those who are watching in TV land or take interest, or the media, I know the city had been advertising they'd be opening up May long weekend, but certainly they were observed to be open very much so last week. So I agree. Great pivot on the side of the city to respond to the nice weather for one, and secondly, I mean, kids are at home learning, but the reality is in many cases a lot of them are done at different times or earlier or otherwise, and so there's opportunity, and so they're either going to go. If they're going to do it, they're either going to gather because they have a propensity to do that, or they're going to be able to be outdoors. And certainly with the weather and the opening of that, I think that was just absolutely great to see. So from the standpoint of the city, one quick clarification in the question. I know there are some people who and certainly I would agree, felt quite sorry for the restaurant environment who many of whom put out these at some expense, these outdoor patios to accommodate and create their own derived positive response from the restrictions, but only to find that they were shut down. So that, believe it or not, there are some people who believe the city did that. So I'm here to, and I've clarified that was not a city decision. But where are we as far as, and I know you're guessing, because what a lot of people don't know, if they haven't tuned in carefully the last few weeks, is you don't get any information any sooner or later than anyone else, but you happen to be in the role and you get to kind of distill it down to a lay language that everyone, and numbers that everyone can understand and associate with. So fact finding, if you will. What do you anticipate, or maybe you have some idea as far as services? I mean, we know what the lockdown or the implications and timelines associated with that are, but do we know how quickly, or do we have any sense, or have you heard how quickly we will know what we know? And I'll be a little more specific. I have people asking, are we going back to school next week? And I said, well, the date was put out by the minister and by the premier. We haven't heard anything new, but as far as restrictions for restaurants and businesses and the broader community, do you have any sense of what number or numbers we need to see before we can start turning back some of those restrictions? Because I think that's the big thing on a lot of people's minds, and that's coupled with the fact that we've had a lot of people vaccinated and are now hearing kind of what our American brethren are doing, or some of the restrictions are being lifted, not necessarily in tandem with our Canadian environment, and they're getting excited by that, and that perhaps maybe even drove some of the people to get vaccinated. So do you have any thoughts on that? Any guesses as far as when those restrictions will lift based on, or not restrictions, but when things will loosen based on a numbers versus a date-specific timeline?
Through the chair, excellent questions. And maybe I'll address this in 3 points because I just want to follow up on a couple of points that you'd made as well. And so as it relates to, my office knowing about the restrictions in advance or at the time of the announcement, and it very much is at the time of the announcement. And throughout the past probably 2 to 3 months or so, a number of the restrictions have been immediate. And so I can recall at least 2 or 3 times where I had the maybe unfortunate opportunity to huddle with some of my colleagues at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock at night, just as members of the public or local business owners would as well, because these restrictions were effective immediately, not the next day, not 3 days later, but effective immediately. And so my office is informed the same time that I'm watching that 3:30 update by Dr. Hinshaw, just as anybody else is. The second point, specifically to your question, is a very interesting one, and this is one that we actually picked up on as it relates to these current restrictions that we're in. So these set of restrictions, and to be able to come out of the restrictions, was one of the first times where it actually wasn't tied to a number, it was tied to a date. So this is perhaps maybe the province is adapting a bit more to what reality is, and perhaps they can't tie it to a number anymore. I'm just speculating on that one, but the statements that have been provided is when we can get these case counts down. What that actually means, nobody actually really knows that yet. But it was definitely tied to a date, so it was that 3-week period of time from when the date came in. But what that means in 3 weeks, nobody really knows. And perhaps I'll use a bit of my optimism, as I did throughout the course of the presentation here. And we're dropping considerably, so we just need to keep up this current pace that we're in for the next week or so, or 2 weeks, drive some of those hospitalizations down, drive some of those ICU rates down, and I'm confident that we should be in a good spot. not unlike what we saw, post Thanksgiving or even Christmas for that matter, where we had restrictions in place and we just were not dropping. But we are seeing a considerable drop. We just need to keep that pace. The third point regarding, what we're seeing down in the U.S. and, perhaps local residents or even people within the province are saying, well, why can't we be like this? And I wanted maybe to put some factual evidence into this as well. And as stated by the province is we're very different from the U.S. and we're very different than the U.S. from two perspectives. So the first one is the U.S. had a considerably higher basically case rate, so per 100,000 people, so considerably higher. Far more people got infected based on the population, and also death rates were incredibly high as well. But I think the second point is their ICU capacity within the U.S. is significantly higher than what Canada is because it's privatized in the U.S., it's public in Canada. And so the whole premise of, or the whole basis or premise based on the restrictions is to ease the hospitalizations and ICU rates. And so you can't look at one country to another and say, why can't we be like that? We are different than the U.S. on multiple fronts. So with just so much higher case counts in the city or in the U.S. and death rates is they were able to actually leverage off of that natural immunity.
Councillor Hirsch?
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Merrick, of course, for your presentation. And I know, like you had said, you're just like along with the ride with all of us with the information that gets forthcoming. But, it's interesting. I received a letter. My organization sponsored an event in the future. And with that, the organization sent me an email with a letter from Dr. Dina Henshaw that said, here's some timelines that we feel that we will be opening up. This organization, yeah, you're clear to proceed. Here's what we're looking at. And it actually indicated that by the end of July, that we're almost at the stage, and I'm not trying to raise any hoorays or anything like that, but, and this was signed by Dina and saying that by the end of July, they're feeling that we're going to start lifting quite a bit of the restrictions. So, maybe not crystal balling it, but is that consistent with what you're hearing? I know timelines it could be a week later or a week before. It's just literally day by day, but maybe your thoughts, because you're absolutely right on your point. You see it all the time. I watched a hockey game last night and said, wow, look at the people with no masks, and I'm so jealous. But yet people around this area are going to go 1 + 1 = 2. If they can do it, why can't we? And I think that's what's going to create, not unrest by any stretch, but there's certainly a lot of enthusiasm to get past this. Your thoughts?
Through the chair, once again, an excellent question, and you are correct. That is what is being stated by the province. Is in that July timeframe, we should see a considerable number of restrictions being lifted. But that is solely based off of two factors, and the first one is following the public health measures, because as we've seen over the course of 15 months now, they do work. Once health restrictions or health measures come into place, when those case counts are high, case counts drop down. Once the case or the restrictions are lifted, we do see a little bit of an increase, sometimes a considerable increase. The second one is vaccinations. If we can keep up with this current rate, and I gave the number of 47.3 locally, if we can keep up with that and increase it, that immunity gets built up, and based on, and this is stated right from the province, based on their predictions, we should be at a point in July where that immunization rate is in the 60 to 70%. And I'll give maybe a little glimmer of hope here as well, is the Calgary Stampede, which was canceled last year, stated publicly. It's happening this year. It's going to look different, but it's happening. They're confident that it can occur, and in fact, even the Premier was speaking about that this afternoon, the fact that the Calgary Stampede was going forward. So there is some confidence both on the kind of the business level or the Stampede level and the provincial level.
Any other questions, comments? If we could get a motion for reception
So moved.
Second.
and vote. And Councillor McIntosh, if you could verbally.
In favor.
Thank you, and that was unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to reports now. Item 5.1, Energy and Infrastructure Committee meeting of May the 6th. And this is just a motion to close for information.
I'll move that report for information.
If we could vote.
Second.
Councillor McIntosh,
In favor.
it was unanimous. Thank you.
Item 5.2 is the Public Services Committee meeting of May 10th for adoption and information with adoption of the priority programming for 2022 to 2023 Family and Community Support Services funding allocation.
Your worship, I move the report as indicated, and once it's seconded, just wanted to make a couple of comments, if I could.
I'll second that.
Go ahead, Councillor Friesen.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple of important things in this report, and again, just want to highlight. So when we consider our 2022-23 FCSS funding allocation, you have identified here the eligibility criteria. Important that you note this also meets the criteria that exists within the FCSS guidelines. So this is important to you and for our community to understand that, and these are not in any particular priority order, but things like services for children, youth, and families, volunteer development programs that affect the whole community. There are things like mental health supports and programming focused on inclusiveness and diversity, as well as increasing neighborhood leadership in communities. Those are the kinds of things that meet the criteria, both our priority criteria that we're proposing here tonight that we would like you to adopt, and that of the formal criteria for our family and community support services. The other thing is we continue to have our discussions on segments of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan as we envision what it will be like in the future. And I'm hoping you've had a chance to look at this, all of you, but I found this particularly compelling, the background information about including a conscious demeanor regarding innovation and technology within the strategic planning process and in the early management and development of operations. And if you go further down into the report, you'll notice a couple of interesting things. So there's incremental innovation, which is ongoing improvements in what you're already doing. There's breakthrough innovation, which happens when something just surges into the marketplace, like maybe Uber or something like that. There is innovation based on a business model, which you're all familiar with. And there's also new venture innovation, which is it's identifying things early on so that you stay competitive in your particular marketplace. And when you go down further to the next page, you'll see some really good examples of the type of innovation that the City of Medicine Hat through their Parks and Recreation are involved in. And there's a number of them in all four of those components, which to me shows quite an interesting balance and also a healthy balance. And then finally, I wanted to take, this is page 319 of your report. This is the one that I found the most interesting. So this recommendation is basically for the city to focus on the early adopters or the early majority area, not exclusively, but that's where the focus would be. If you look at the graph, you'll see that the further to the right that yellow line goes, the higher the risk becomes. So if you wait too long and you fiddle around and you say, oh, we'll see what happens, maybe it'll work, well, we're not ready, we've got too many things on our plate, or whatever the case may be, you become a laggard and your risk increases exponentially. It's fascinating. And so we don't want to be the absolute cutting edge, chasing the shiny objects, as City Manager Nicolay would say. We don't always be wanting to chase the shiny objects, but we sure don't want to be the end of the road either. And so on this spectrum, we want to be early adopters, early majority, which I found quite fascinating. So thank you for letting me talk to you about that.
Thank you. Councillor McIntosh?
Thanks, Your Worship. Just a question on item number 1 on that report, and it probably one of the committee members could help answer it. And I appreciate these are FCSS guidelines that this is based on. There are two that seem very similar to me, the volunteer development programs versus programs that increase leadership opportunities in neighborhoods. Could somebody just give me a little clarity on the difference between those?
I was thinking it was community neighborhood associations, which was a target, a strategic target. I
Well,
don't know.
maybe I'll take, I thought maybe DM Estelle might want to speak to this, but, you know, volunteer programs that support or help develop an entire community can be very different from those that increase neighborhood leadership opportunities. Neighborhood associations are a good example. We have spent some FCSS funding for a number of years on projects like the North Flats Neighborhood Association, really benefiting children and families, so it meets more than one of these criteria. So I think that's the difference. Volunteer opportunities to impact the entire community could be very different than those specific to a neighborhood.
That's what, yeah. Councillor Hirsch?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just a question with regards to the Parks and Rec Master Plan. And, you know, again, just reading the report, it indicates to me it's going to be very methodical and inclusive with regard to reaching out to our community as well, which is great, but that also takes time. So my thought is two things. What's the approximate timelines that's projected for completion of this? Whereas I have a feeling we might not even get it during this term. And then the second piece is there any impediments to getting some urgent requests in terms of what the origination of why the master plan needs to get looked at anyway, vis-a-vis hockey rinks, et cetera, that have a certain time frame that we really need to go do some actionable steps in terms of our infrastructure. So, you know, is there going to be roadblocks along the way or speed bumps, if you will, to this report? And if you don't mind responding to that.
Your Worship, we do envision a process, and it's not going to be tomorrow, and we would hope to have it done within a timely way, but I'm a little hesitant to give you a timeline. You're right about speed bumps. You're right about public consultation, but it's really important because this is a community plan, if you will. You are also aware, though, that we have a number of city recreation facilities that are aging. They are going to face considerable cost in keeping them open if we should decide to do that. We have to look at the demographics and the needs of the community looking forward. And as I talked about, the trends, the innovations, do we just chase after the thing that looks really good right now? Or do we pick the things where we can build on our strength? All of those things are going to be really important, so they'll take some time. I can't remember, quite honestly, if we learned at committee an exact date, but it will take some months.
Just supplemental. I'm just hoping, and I appreciate Councillor Friesen, I really do. I'm just hoping that the infrastructure clock doesn't strike 12 and we have to make decisions and spend some money of taxpayers' money inadvertently, and all of a sudden 2 years later or a year later when we implement, we say, oh, we're not going to use that facility anymore, and then the argument could be that you're throwing money after things that we shouldn't have been doing in the first place. So I get it, and I appreciate, again, and I was in my comments, I appreciate the steps that's being taken, but in some cases, I just don't know if the urgency, that level of urgency needs to be there as well, because there is some infrastructure needs we need to take care of.
If I could, one more time, Your Worship. You're absolutely right, and I think I fell short a little bit in my comments to your question before. There will be some, and more around the aging infrastructure and those kinds of things, there will be some short-term decisions that have to be made, and we'll have to carve them out of the longer-term discussions in some cases, because we need to make a decision. But if we can take advantage of these kinds of discussions as best we can in in contemplating those short-term decisions that have to be made. We'll be better off than just doing them as a knee-jerk reaction.
Well said. Any other questions, comments? All right, if we could vote on this report. Councillor McIntosh?
In favor.
That was unanimous, thank you.
Next report's item 5.3, Administrative and Legislative Review Committee meeting. Just a motion to close for information.
So moved.
Second.
If we could vote. Councillor McIntosh?
In favor.
That was unanimous, thank you.
Item 5.4 is the Corporate Services Committee meeting of May the 11th with the CCDA report for adoption.
I'll move that report as indicated.
Second.
Any comments? If we could vote. Councillor McIntosh?
In favor.
That was unanimous, thank you.
Item 5.5, the Administrative Committee meeting of May 12th with the Airport Electrical Visual Aids replacement and capital budget amendment for adoption.
So moved.
Second.
I noticed that Mr. Hunt is available as well, if there's any. Councillor Turnbull?
Yes, thank you. This is a really great news story, and so I'm going to leave it up to through the city manager, whether it's Brad or Mr. Huntis from the airport. But you know, sometimes people say, "Oh, we're spending $1,075,000 to upgrade lighting at the airport." What do you know? These guys are on the ball, and I'm going to let them finish the end of the story because I don't want to give away all their funds. So, whoever wants to answer, please do so.
Through the chair to Councillor Turnbull, maybe I'll go first and then turn it over to Pat and Jeff. Good evening. So tonight's item highlights proactive work on the part of Manager Huntis under the leadership of Director Bohan. Jeff saw an opportunity to apply for federal funding for regional airport infrastructure renewal. He jumped on it, he put in the application, and with not a lot of fanfare. And as a result, our airport will receive just over $1 million in upgrades. The upgrades are specific to our lighting and our approach systems, which, although currently safe and certainly safe and compliant, they are nearing the end of their operational life. So this proactive initiative on the part of Jeff certainly has moved our needle as it pertains to our airport operations much closer to an operating status that reflects current day. But as I said and indicated by Councillor Turnbull, both Jeff and Pat are available this evening for additional comments on that. Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, this is your time to take a bow in front of our citizens for your job well done to save us $1 million out of $1,057,000 project. So the floor is yours.
I'll go ahead first there, Jeff. I know your mouth is open, so I'll take that moment of opportunity. Just wanted to echo Managing Director Main's good comments about Jeff. He has failed to install the appropriate radar under which he flies to get this kind of project done, and has shown a tremendous leadership and initiative in making this project successful. So the reason for us coming forward today is that this is budget that we did not have in our current year, so we are asking for this funding to secure $957,000 of federal funding and net increase of $50,000 to our budget. And with that, I just want to once again call out Manager Huntis' efforts at finding this money and making this project happen. Well done, Jeff.
Your Worship, if I could just comment a little bit on the project. Thank you very much for the kind words, but sometimes we're just doing our jobs. The project itself will bring all of our critical infrastructure up to date. We've replaced the runway, we've expanded our terminal building, we've improved airport parking areas. We were ready for wonderful things until the pandemic. This little break has given us the opportunity now, through the increased funding from the federal government, to take care of that last critical piece of infrastructure to keep us safe. We were never unsafe, but after 21 years of operation, these things, they start to become expensive to operate and expensive to maintain. So we'll realize some benefits on the maintenance side. We'll realize some benefits on the environmental side with state-of-the-art technology running these lighting systems. And it's a good time during downtime to get the work done with minimal disruption. So we're looking forward to it. It was part of the fall economic update package from the federal government. It was an existing program, and they increased the funding from $38 million to $93 million for 2 years. So we saw the opportunity. We had planned to put this forward in the next budget cycle, but when the opportunity came along, it was too good to pass up. So we're looking forward to getting this project moving upon approval and having it completed before the snow flies, and won't quite be in time for WestJet's return, but we're optimistic it will make their return an awful lot easier.
Well,
thank you.
Yeah, so well done, but just understand the pressure that you have put yourselves under. That every time we need $1 million, and we're going to put out 50,000, and you guys are going to find it for us, correct? Just a little humor from the old guy here.
Well done. Is any other questions or comments? All right. If we could vote. And Councillor.
In favor.
That was unanimous. Thank you.
Moving along now to reports for reception. Municipal Planning Commission meeting minutes of April 28th.
I move this report for reception.
Second.
Comments? Okay, if we could vote. Councillor McIntosh?
In favor.
That was unanimous. Thank you.
Next, we have our new bylaws. The first bylaw is Bylaw 4668, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend Bylaw 4168, the Land Use Bylaw. This is for first reading only for 29 5th Street Southeast, which is proposed zoning from low density to medium density.
I move for leave to introduce bylaw number 4668, and that'd be read a first time.
Second.
If we could vote. Councillor McIntosh?
In favor.
That was unanimous. Thank you.
So we withdrew the next item, item 7.2, so we'll move on to item 7.3, which is bylaw 4671, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to authorize the Council of the City to impose a 2021 supplementary property tax, and with unanimous consent, this can go for 3 readings.
Your Worship, I seek leave of council to introduce bylaw 4671, and ask that it be read a first time.
Second.
If we could vote. Councillor McIntosh?
In favor.
That was unanimous.
Your Worship, seeking unanimous consent of council,
Second.
second reading of bylaw 4671.
Second.
Any questions or comments? If we could vote. Councillor McIntosh?
In favor.
That was unanimous.
Now we're seeking unanimous consent to move to third reading of bylaw 4671.
Second.
If we could vote.
In favor.
And you have consent.
This time, Your Worship, I ask that bylaw 4671 be read a third time and passed.
Second.
Any questions or comments on third reading? Seeing none, if we could vote.
In favor.
Councillor Turnbull, yours didn't register. That's okay. And that was unanimous. Thank you. Seeing no more business before this council, we're adjourned.
Participant exiting.
Ben Bullock,
Brian Mastel.